morning, everybody. Welcome to our second session together. Again, let me remind you, the recipes that you have gotten are mere jumping off points, and that will be evident today with the Valencian cod. I hadn't made anything like that in a while, and I tried it last week, and I decided it needed some perking up. So, if any of you are cooking with me today, you might want to grab an onion if you have one. You might want to grab a red or orange or yellow pepper if you have one, and perhaps even a can of white beans if you have that. It's not necessary, but it's just something that I'm going to add to that. And when we get to it, I'll remind you to write it down on the recipe if you have printed it. Um, True to my declaration last week, dessert comes first. So that's what we're going to start with today. Apple tarts. And I can't claim ownership to this. This is Ina Garten's recipe, which I saw when I first got cable TV and discovered the Food Channel way before I ever decided to go to culinary school. I would have loved to make the puff pastry, the laminated dough from scratch. It's infinitely better. Once you have that, you'll never want to eat any other puff pastry, but it would take a little bit of time and couldn't do that. I also normally do not recommend a specific product or brand, but this is what I'm using, the Pepperidge Farm pastry sheets. And the reason that I like them is they do not have lard in them and they do not have any dairy products. So it's ideal for anybody that has dietary issues and lactose intolerant or even a vegetarian. So it comes in a package like so. I have floured my surface a little bit because this has been out of the fridge now, the freezer, and I didn't want it to stick. It comes very easily in a very friendly manner to use. So it comes in two sheets like this. I'm going to lay one sheet down, and I'm going to show you how I can use the same ingredients in the same recipe to make multiple types of desserts. So it's already folded into thirds. I'm just going to cut it now into this one we'll use for something else, but I'm going to cut this into two sheets, and then I'm going to cut it in half. So I have four little sheets of pastry. And what I'm going to do now that I have the pastries, I am going to put the apples on here, and I have pre-cut them. I have used both red and green apples because I like the color contrast. I don't peel them. The recipe calls for them to be peeled. But what I'm going to do is just layer them and on here, and I'm going to alternate colors just because I can. And it's so simple to do. So I'm just, and you can use all the same type of apple. These were Granny Smith, and do you remember what the others were?
Gala.
Granny Smith and Gala is what we used. And you just layer them like this really simply. And I think it's beautiful. I love the contrast in colors when I'm able to do that. And we used 4 apples here, which would be enough to make plenty of pastry. And you can do this with any type of fruit. Also, you can use pears, peaches, anything that grapes even. You can use all sorts of fruit to do this. Here's a red one. I'm probably being a little OCD in terms of making sure that they're alternating. You don't have to do that necessarily. Here, I'll stick this one back in here. And one more red one.
Lenny, there was a question about, did you put some lemon juice on there?
I did, but only because I cut them in advance.
So ordinarily, would you have to?
No, the only reason you would have to is if you don't want them to brown. And frankly, if I didn't, I don't know that it would be so terrible since I'm baking them anyhow. But I did. So now I've put the apples and overlapped them. I'm going to put them on my baking sheets right here, and then I'm going to sprinkle them with sugar. Now, when you see chefs on TV sprinkling salt or sugar or pepper, they always do it from up here. That's not for drama. That's for the purpose of getting a better spread. If you're really close, the ingredient is going to fall right on top of where your hand is. If you're up here, it's going to get a much better spread. And I'm just using a pinch. I'm not using very much at all. Okay, now we have that. And the next thing that we do is we will dot it with butter. But before I do that, I have my other sheet of puff pastry. And I'm going to basically do the same thing. But in this case, I'm not going to worry here about the colors. I'm just going to do it randomly. Or actually I am. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to alternate rows. And I am doing this diagonally. I am taking the apples and just layering them across this big sheet. So here, I'm not going to have an individual tart. I'm going to have a tart that I can cut up and serve. But it looks really pretty when you do this. And you can do any type of pattern that you want. You could do a circular, a spiral starting in the middle and working your way outside. You could do a rectangle type deal, anything you want. So here I am just doing diagonal rows. And in my corners, I'll just fill them in like so. Now, if I was really, if I, under normal circumstances, when I'm not pressed for time, I would be much more meticulous about laying them out and making sure they all overlap equally and symmetrically. Not going to affect the taste, but the appearance might be slightly enhanced. But you get the idea of what I'm doing here. Okay, so I've got this one also. Ring slice. And I'm gonna lift this up. Ellen was kind enough to find me a huge spatula. Hopefully I can get it on here with minimal disruption. All right, that looks pretty good to me. I have a couple spaces here. So I'm gonna sprinkle some sugar over that as well. And you don't necessarily need the sugar. If you want to omit it, that's fine. Okay. And then the last thing the recipe calls for is to dot it with butter. You could use some clay if you wanted to. Obviously, butter gives it a nice flavor. But any type of cooking spray would be fine. I'm going to use little pieces. So just like this, I'm going to put some butter on them. The butter's going to melt and make it delicious. I'm going to put this in the oven. And while I put this in the oven, we're going to make our glaze. So our glaze, which we're going to brush these with after they come out of the oven, is made out of any fruit preserve. And I don't care what the flavor is. Some people like to use a clear type color, something like apricot or orange. I don't know. Our flavor today is peach, and we used simply fruit because it has less sugar, and it's nice to be able to control the amount of sugar that you want to put on your pastry. So we're going to stick this in the oven and put the timer on. If you're cooking with me, I hope you've caught up. So I've got two types of things with the same ingredients. It's just a different presentation of how you want to do it. What is the timer on here, if you don't mind, Ellen?
Yes.
Ellen is going to put that on the timer for, it says 40 minutes. We're going to do 30 minutes, and then we'll check it. Okay. Now, you may have noticed I reserved one piece. Still have one piece left. So let me show you this trick right here. Pull it out a little bit. And this will really wow your guests. Normally, I would have cooked these in the microwave for a few minutes or a few seconds rather, just to soften them up. But I didn't do that with these, and they've been sitting out for a little bit, so they are somewhat soft. I'm looking for the thinner slices, and I'm layering them alongside this dough with the tops protruding. You want basically half of the apple to come from the top, to be seen from the top. I'm looking for the thinner pieces that I have. Okay, so you see how I basically have covered half of the dough with these apple slices. Then what I'm going to do, add a little sugar here. And I'm going to spread a little bit of butter also. And normally, I don't have it done yet, but you could also put some glaze here at this point if you wanted to. So I've dotted it with butter. And I'm going to take the bottom and fold it. And I still have apple protruding. Okay? Now, you may be wondering, where am I going with this? Where I'm going is that I'm going to make an apple rose. So I'll take this. And again, if the apples are cooked a little bit, they're not going to break the way they're breaking here. But I'm doing this for demonstration purposes. I want you to see what it looks like. Look at that. So I've got a rose, and I've got a muffin tin, and I have some cooking spray. I'm going to spray my tin so it doesn't stick. And I'm going to put this in there like so. And we're going to stick this in the oven too and see what happens with it. Now remember, it doesn't look as beautiful as it would if I had cooked the apples for a minute or so in the microwave. You can see here how this one cracked. That's not good, but this is good, how it's just layered like petals. You can see over here too. But I wanted to show you the technique because it's really easy and it really impresses people when you do this. And I'm going to just stick this in the oven also. And we'll check on it in a little bit. So that was our dessert. Now that we have dessert going, we're ready to start on our next dish. And the next one that we're going to do is the Valencian pie. So you need a Dutch oven for that, or any pot that's heavy and that will sustain oven heat as well. I like using this pot. This is something that you can buy in a Hispanic hardware store or maybe grocery store. Traditionally, this is called an arrocera, which is how they would make rice. in here, and it's good because you can use it on the stove top, or and you don't need this pot, but if you want a quick way of making rice, equal parts of rice and liquid, put it in here, maybe a little bit of salt and some olive oil, put the cover on it and stick it in the 350-degree oven for about 30-35 minutes. Look at it at that point. If there's still water in, put it in, and you'll get perfect al dente rice every time. That's a bonus. That's not what we're talking about today. Today we're moving on to the Valencian fish. But before I do that, I want to show you here what I had done for our glaze. And I'm going to heat it up. This was just apricot jam, and the recipe called for calvados, which is um, an apple wine. I use today Canadian Club whiskey. We just put a little bit of whiskey and a little bit of the jam, and I'm going to bring it up to a boil so that I have a nice glaze that I can later brush on the pastry. If you travel to Europe and other parts of the country, all the tarts that are on the bakery shelf look beautiful, and it's because they put a glaze on them. We don't do that as often here. But you can buy jelly if you prefer, or jam. But you can see this was, like I said, all fruit, so it is going to have a few chunks in it, but that's okay. I don't mind that. Let me bring my pot over here to the heat source. And we're going to take our fish. So for this recipe, we are doing cod. And here is the cod. We used fresh cod. It could be, one can use salted cod, which they call bacalao in Spain, but we use fresh. And if you think that cod is too fishy, smelling or tasting, you can cut down that flavor and that scent by soaking it in milk, which we did overnight. It's not a necessity. It's just a preference. And so what we're going to do now.
And Lenny, tell them that it was in milk overnight, but obviously we spilled the milk out and drained the fish.
We drained the fish and we patted it dry. I want to start with a dry fish for this recipe. And what I'm going to do is season it with some salt and pepper. Again, just like I explained earlier, I'm going to do it from up high. Hopefully not make a mess in Ellen's kitchen in the process. But you can see how I'm getting a good spread just from the pepper. You can see that. A little bit of salt. I don't like, I'm going to add a little bit. In restaurants, they do use a lot of salt. In home cooking, I prefer to use some and let people salt their fish as they want. So let's come here to my jam. It's coming to a boil, and you can see how it's almost like a liquid now. So I'm just going to turn that off. If I need to heat it up a little bit before I brush it on the pastry, I will do that. But it smells great. That whiskey has given off the alcohol. The alcohol has boiled away, and it smells great in here. So you can see it's got little pieces, but it's also nice and liquid, which will be perfect to brush onto our pastry. And when it dries, it'll dry to a very nice, shiny glaze. I'm putting my gloves on, and I'm going to turn the fish around because the fish deserves to be seasoned on both sides. I'm getting a nice dusting of fish. Okay, so moving on. I told you that the recipe that I had there looked good, but I thought I could do better. So what I did when I made it this week is I started out with some olive oil and onion and red pepper. And that's what we're going to do today too. I'm going to turn on the heat here. Start it off at high. I like to get the pan real hot. And here we have the onions that I've cut. I cut them in little rounds. And the same with the peppers. I just cut them into strips because I wanted them there. I didn't want them to blend into the sauce. I wanted them to be visible and be part of what we're eating. Also, am using some cannellini beans, and I just drained them with my hand like this. I don't mind keeping some of the liquid in there because it does add a little flavor and it's going to thicken my sauce a little bit. And I would like that. Oops. Those are cannellini beans, but it doesn't have to be a certain brand.
No.
And I like these. They're very buttery and creamy. They're soft. See, they're nice. They're a nice bean. And the reason I went with this, I have a recipe for something called Portuguese bean soup, and it combined the red pepper and the beans with some chicken stock, and it's really delicious. And I thought, well, maybe I should add that. Portugal's right next to Spain, and Valencia, of course, is in the region. So it came out great. I thought it came out great. All right, so we're just getting warm. I'm going to add some olive oil. I like to be generous with olive oil. Last week, I was listening to a show on NPR, and they said olive oil is a secret ingredient of the Mediterranean diet. So that's what we're using. And I'm not scared to use some of it. We've got fresh bay leaves today, and that's an experiment too. We don't know how it will affect us, but I think it'll be fine. I'm taking 2 nice leaves. Smell nice. I've got some soup base today. This is a vegetable soup base. And normally what I use is just some chicken soup powder that is unfortunately chemicals, but I just use a teaspoon. I use that in lieu of salt. And for my bouillon, we're also going to put some wine in this. And we're going to do some saffron. And that's the secret ingredient that's going to make this dish pop and really be tasty. So I'm going to put my aromatics in here. And you can hear the sizzle. That's how I know that it was ready to receive the ingredients. Thank you. And I'm going to start with this and wait for them to soften up a little bit. Look how pretty those colors look. And that's the other thing that I decided when I read that recipe. I thought the potatoes and the fish would all be the same color. So we're heating that up a little bit. I'm going to add the red pepper to it. And this is something that you can do at your preference. If you don't like it spicy, then don't put some in. I think it added a little bit, and I'm not putting too much. Maybe I don't know, a teaspoon or so. The rest of the salt for half a teaspoon. So I'm sauteing these. Yeah, garlic. 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 I'm also going to add some garlic, which I had forgotten to prep. So bear with me. I'm going to cut a couple slices. As I do that, really simple. I just peel And I don't really care what the shape is going to be because it's going to boil together. It's going to be part of the sauce. So hard to work with gloves, but at least your hands don't smell like fish or garlic later on. Anybody have any questions yet? So again, holding the knife the way I mentioned last week gives me a lot of control. And I'm just going to chop it up. I don't really care how small it is. You could use a mincer and just a garlic press rather. This is small enough. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to dump this into my sauce or my base of the sauce. And you can see my onions are starting to wilt, which is good. I'm glad I didn't put the garlic in at first because I don't want the garlic to burn at all. Oh, it smells awesome already, doesn't it, Ellen?
It smells wonderful.
So the next step is going to be my tomatoes. And what I'm going to do is actually because I'm going to do saffron. I bought, here's the saffron, and a little bit goes a long way. You don't need to use that much. I'm using a pinch of saffron, and you can get this anywhere. This happens to come from Trader Joe's. You can get it at Publix or anywhere else. You can order it online. I'm not sure if you're going to find it where the spices are, or you might have to go to where the ethnic foods are and find the saffron near the Hispanic foods. I know Badia, Badia, sells a little plastic box of it, and it's delicious. So these are all wilted. I'm going to put in my tomatoes, crushing as I go in with it, with my hand. I guess if you want whole pieces, you could do that. If you want really fine pieces, you could also do that in a food processor, or just give it a rough chop with a knife. But this is about 14 ounces of tomatoes. You could put the juice in there if you want. I'm choosing not to because I don't want it to be too tomatoey. I want it to be um, to accentuate the saffron. And we can smell the saffron here. Aromatic. So
I just did.
so I'm stirring this in a little bit of vegetable base, and I'm going to add some water. Recipe also calls for some wine, which I have here. I have a nice California white. Now, you don't want to use Riesling or Moscato. And I'm going to turn this back up to high because I want to bring it to a boil. And I'm ready to put my potatoes in. I cut potatoes early on, and I've been soaking them in water, again, because I didn't want them to turn. The best potatoes for this dish are either these red potatoes or Yukon Gold potatoes are really good. You don't want to use russet because they're really starchy and they're going to break apart. These are going to maintain their shape really nicely. And I'm just putting them in here as a base. The cod is going to rest on top of it as after we cook these. So I'm going to bring this to a boil, And then we're gonna basically simmer this. Mix it up a little bit, make sure all that goodness from the sauce is on the potatoes. We cut a lot of potatoes today. But really, if you use the golden Yukons, you probably need 1 potato per person and you'll still have plenty left over. And you can, now that it's boiling, I can smell everything, the wine and the saffron. So I think that's plenty of potatoes for us. I'm glad I brought a big pan. We were going to use a smaller pan, and I said, nah, we're going to cook a number of fish pieces. So I'm going to bring that to a boil, and then I'm going to cover it and simmer it, and it'll take about 15 minutes for us to be able to put our fish in. And what I'm gonna do when we get to it is I'll probably saute the fish or sear it a little bit in olive oil just to give it some color that we might not otherwise get. So my sauce is boiling already, and I'm gonna put the cover on it and bring it down to low or medium low. I want to keep it at a boil, and we'll test that in 15, 20 minutes. All right, so that's our fish, our Galatian cod. I've got the cod here, and what I'm going to do with that is, like I said, just sear it just a little bit to get it some color. And is this on? This is a great stove, but you need a lesson for it. Okay, so it's on high. I'm going to heat it up, and we're going to saute the cod, which I already have here prepped. I'm going to do it in olive oil because that's the basis of the other dish. And I'm just going to do a little bit. I don't really, remember, I'm not cooking the fish necessarily. I just want to give it a little bit of color. And that's a technique that is quite common. You know, we're always barbecuing and grilling, and that's always nice, you know, to have all the grill marks. But you can make a delicious steak or piece of chicken by searing it on the stovetop a minute or so, 2 minutes on each side, and then putting it into the oven and baking it and finishing it up that way. Then you take it out. If you don't have a kitchen thermometer, you can probably get one for under $15. And it's nice to have it because if you're baking your chicken, your meat, whatever, stick that thermometer in. Chicken, for instance, you want it at 160, 165 degrees. You can take it out at 155, 158, tent it with foil, let it sit on your counter, and it'll reach temperature, and it'll be perfect. It won't be dry. So here we go. We're just gonna, I can see the oil is beating. So, and I hear the sizzling. Now I'm not gonna cook these all the way through because then it'll fall apart, and I don't want it to fall apart. Cod is a very flaky fish. And what I'm using is the implement that I'm using is a fish spatula. It's very thin on the end, and it's a little curved, and it facilitates the fish moving it around without destroying it. I'm just giving it a little bit of color. I'm really worried about it breaking. Look here, you can always already see it starting to flake. So this is what I'm looking for, just a little bit of color before I put it back on the dish, and it will end up going back into this pot. So this one's done. There we go. I can see it's still pink inside, which is what I want. Again, I'm not cooking it, I'm just searing it for a minute. And you don't have to do this. This is an extra step. You can just follow the recipe and put the fish on top and then poach it. But I kind of like the color. Look at that. That's exactly what I want. Just a little bit of color. To me, it makes it a little more attractive and appealing to eat. This was my very thin piece. You see how the top is flaked off? So I don't want to keep it too long. Any questions? Okay. We're just going to put that aside for now. Oh, left a piece here. It's funny, when I was a kid and we used to go out to dinner, I would often order fish. And sometimes the restaurant, the service would take a long time. My mother would say, "Oh, it's because of your fish." I don't know, that's a boogermeister, that's a fib, a myth. Fish cooks in very, very little bit of time. As you saw, many of these thinner pieces of cod that I sauteed here are already cooked and ready to be eaten. So fish doesn't take a long time. We're going to go on to the next recipe, which is the peche limona, which is basically just fish in lemon sauce. Now, people had commented, Alan, do we have to use cod for these recipes? The answer is no. The Valencian cod, you probably want a thicker, firmer white fish, like a grouper, perhaps a snapper. I would not use flounder or tilapia on that because it'll fall apart. I'm just checking my potatoes here. They are boiling, which is what I want. So putting back those in, let's check on our puff pastry. It's cooking up nicely. You can see that it's puffing up a little bit already and browning. And our rose is also looking good. Look at that. In fact, that one's probably a little too close to the heating element, so I'm going to put it down below. So we still have a few minutes on that. So back to our fish. So we're going to do the lemon fish. In this case, we're using flounder. I've got some nice pieces of flounder. And the cooking method is going to be very similar to what I just did with the cod. I'm going to lay it out and add some salt and pepper to it on each side. And then we're going to saute it. And I'm going to put it into this baking dish. And then we'll go from there. So first thing that I want to do is salt it, season it on both sides. Tilapia works on this if you're a fan of tilapia. It's an inexpensive fish, farm raised in most cases. The flounder will be really delicious with this too, I believe. Again, a little bit of pepper. Notice how I'm getting a pretty good spread just by doing it from up top. If I was doing it close, I wouldn't get such a good spread. A little bit of salt, I didn't use very much. And what I'm going to do with these, I'm also going to dredge them in flour. And one of the things that you could do is you could put seasonings, if you prefer, in your flour. And you can spice yourself. You can use Italian seasoning or anything you want. I'm just doing it really basic today. So let me get my flour. I did have it out here. And I'm going to grab a pan here. I'm gonna put some flour in here. I'm gonna dredge my fish, and then we're gonna go over to the stove again and saute it. I'm gonna use the same pan because there's nothing cross-contaminating it. So what I'm gonna do is I want a very light coating. I don't want a cakey fish fillet. So I'm just gonna pat them down. Use your fingers, just brush it off. Give it a little spanking or love tap, depending on your mood. And I just used maybe, what, 3/4 cup of flour? I didn't use very much. And we're not doing a breading here. We're just doing a light flour coating, which will give it some texture. I hear a bell, and that must mean that my oven is telling me to check the pastries. They are not quite the color that I want yet, so we're going to add another 10 minutes to it and see how that goes. So I'm going to take my saute pan. So I'm going to wipe it down with a paper towel. And I'm going to add some more fresh olive oil. Just because I don't want the little burnt pieces from before to make any flavor. But there's no need in this case for me to wash it again. I can see it's the oil starting to bead. By the way, standing next to this other pot, the fragrance is unbelievable. Between the wine and the saffron, man, I'm tempted to jump in and take a bath in it. It's really, Emeril Lagasse, when he was on TV, he would always talk about smell-o-vision, and now I understand because it's not fair to everybody else out there watching this. So I've got my fish already, my oil warming with some fresh gloves on. And I'm going to bring this temperature down because I don't want about 5, 6. Okay, this fish also, the lemon fish, is going to be baked again. So again, I'm just searing it. I want a little bit of color on it. And this is the frying pan. I'm going to use this for the spinach as well, because I want the residual flavor from the fish to permeate the spinach as well. I'm testing my potatoes, and they are al dente. You could eat them. They're nice and soft, not mushy. If you would have had a starchy potato in here, it would be mushy. Not meaning to confuse anybody, but I'm shifting back to the Valencian cod in the interest of time. I am going to put this into the dish right on top of the potatoes. And if your fish breaks down, it's okay. It's probably better, maybe in certain respects, to just have pieces of fish permeating your your dish. And you can see the cod was very, very fresh and it had fallen apart, but it could be a potato dish with a cod sauce over it. So I'm just going to leave this on for a few minutes to poach it, and then we'll put that in the oven as soon as I take the puff pastry out. So that was my Valencian cod. We're coming back to the fish I'll be moment. Starting to sizzle, which is what I want. And again, this is very thin, so I'm going to watch it. I don't want to keep it very long at all. Giving it some color. It's starting to cook, but because it's flaking. And I don't want it to fully cook. I want to cook it in the Pyrex dish because that's where I'm going to add my lemon sauce to it. So I'm going to lay it back out. This is one of the easiest dishes. I don't know how I came up with this, but my kids loved it when they were still at home. And here I've got two more pieces that I'm going to put into here. And while these last two are cooking, I'm going to go ahead and get my Lenny. I'm going to slice these lemons thin. I want to get nice slices because they're going to sit on top of the fish as I bake it. These were great lemons. They came from Fresh Mart.
No, Publix.
From Publix. Huge lemons. They're absolutely beautiful. So watch how I'm going to use these lemons. And put one per slice in this case because they are so big. Usually when I have little lemons, I'll just put a couple across the fish.
You know, actually, I think these are Freshfield Farm. They were tremendous, as big as apples.
Now this could be done totally out in the pan without baking it. I've just been successful baking it, so I haven't changed my methods. But you could fry it a little longer, add some lemon juice to it. But I find that this works really well for me. Okay, so as I'm finished with these, I'm going to put the remaining two lemon slices on here. Now I have not turned the pan off yet because I'm going to add a little bit of butter and a little bit of wine to this. And that's going to be my sauce. And when I say a little bit, I really do mean just a tad. I'm going to turn this off because I really don't need the heat. I just want to melt this. And this is going to be the sauce that I'm going to bake the fish in. Getting some nice browning on the butter, and that's okay. And now I'm going to put a little bit of wine. We will get some steam out of it. If you had cooked the fish, if you had a thicker fish and you cooked it longer and you had brown bits, this process here of adding the wine is called deglazing. And you would scrub the bottom of the pan and get all the golden bits off. And excuse me, Ellen, I'm going to just go and pour this little lemon, well, actually not lemon, but butter wine sauce over the fish. And that's going to be my sauce that I'm baking the fish in. And let's check on the pastry. Now this is getting some nice color, but you can see the apples look really dry, even though we put the butter on. But we'll give it, it has another minute. We're gonna put that in, and I'm gonna work on the spinach that's going with our fish, limonata. How do you want me to keep those things? So I'm using just regular spinach. You could use baby spinach if you prefer. You could do it whole or cut it up. I'm just going to give it a very, very rough chop. And then I'm going to put it in the pan, again, with a little bit of butter and olive oil. Now I'm going to cut one bag into a rough chop, and the other bag I'm going to leave whole, just to give me some better texture. I want a rustic dish. I want it delicious. I don't want it to look like it was made in some plant. So the different sizes, the different shapes will definitely give you that home cooked appearance. Okay, so we're going to take the apples out. Let me just finish off to the side here. I'm going to take the apples out, and we're going to glaze them. Now this looks beautiful. And our rose has really blossomed. Look at that. And look how simple that was to do. Go ahead and put that off to the side. Now that my oven's free, I'm going to put my fish in there, the limonata, and my other fish. It's already cooked. You can see it's poached perfectly, but I'm going to see if I can get some nice browning on it. Oh, that smells good.
Oh, it smells wonderful.
So let me turn on my, oh, okay. So I have my glaze here. It's still warm. And I'm going to grab a brush. And very simple. Look at that. Oh, and that smells delicious too. The apricot, the whiskey, the apples. If you are a fan of cinnamon, you can always sprinkle some cinnamon on these before you bake them. And I noticed now that the recipe called for 3/4 cup of sugar. I obviously didn't follow that. I just did a sprinkling. So you can increase the sweetness level. This is great with coffee for dessert, a mound of ice cream, French vanilla, or even a great ice cream would be dulce de leche, which has kind of a caramel flavor to it. But look how beautiful those look already, and the glaze hasn't even dried yet. So like I said, you can do this in any type of fashion that you want. It doesn't only have to be individual tarts. Use your imagination as you lay out your fruit, because that will give it extra dimension. What you do want to do is you want to be relatively careful to slice the fruit thinly. You don't want big, thick pieces of fruit, because then they won't fully bake. So how easy was that? I think any of us can do this. Like I said, this is my If I always have some of this pastry in my freezer, and if I have unexpected dinner guests and I want to make a dessert, this is my go-to dessert. Although next time we're also going to do a sabayon, which is a custard, I guess, but it's not made with milk. It's made with wine. And that too is a very easy go-to dessert for me. Okay, so this one is done. Let me glaze my rose. And this rose is really nice when you serve it with some powdered sugar on top. But you have to do that just before serving. Otherwise, the moisture will make the sugar melt. Okay, so we're going to just put these off to the side right now. And we will play with them in a little bit. Just a little. Yeah. I think we're going to make our time today. Again, I apologize last time that it took us so long to get through it. We learned from our first experience. All right, so now I was talking about spinach for the fish. So I've got 2 bags of spinach that I'm going to use. I'm going to use this lemon juice here on the spinach and garlic. I wanted to cut up some. Do you have a garlic press?
Yep.
No. Okay. So I'm going to cut a couple pieces of garlic by hand. And I'm not going to tell you how much to use because some people like garlic and some people don't. I am one of those that does like garlic. So whenever I see a number written in a recipe for garlic, I add more. Pure and simple. Any questions?
There was a question about what kind of paper to make the tart on, and that was just commercial parchment paper.
Parchment paper.
Right, you could get at the grocery store. It comes on a roll.
Yeah, I use parchment paper anytime I bake anything. I use parchment paper because I'm too lazy to clean the cookie sheet. And so whenever I'm going to bake anything, be it cookies or brownies or whatever it is, I will line the cookie sheet or the baking sheet with parchment. And and that's what they do in restaurants too, normally. In fact, if you want to, one of the things that I've been doing recently for my son, I showed him how to make scrambled eggs in the oven. Basically, I would take a cookie sheet, I spray it down with spray, and then I also spray a piece of parchment paper. I take a bunch of eggs, a dozen eggs, let's say, and I whisk them up with some salt and pepper. And then I pour the eggs on a cookie sheet or a baking sheet that has a lid to it. And I bake it for maybe 3 minutes. It starts to puff up. I take it out and then I add some cheese on top of it, put it in another 3 minutes, and then I cut it into squares. And it's a great thing to have in your fridge for a fast breakfast. You just take it out. I mean, obviously it's better or best when it's first baked, but you take it out, you put it on between 2 slices of bread, you got an egg cheese sandwich ready to go. Okay, so here I've got some garlic, spinach, and oil, lemon. I'm gonna take a little bit of nutmeg, also spinach and nutmeg pair very well. They're delicious. I'm gonna go heat my pan up again. And the trick here is to not cook the spinach too long because it's still going to continue to cook afterwards. I don't want it to be totally wilted. Do you have a serving platter, dear?
Yes.
Where can I find a serving platter? Does that one work? All right, Alan's getting you a serving platter. Bear with us.
Bear with us. Little noise.
Okay, so we've got a beautiful serving platter. That's where we're going to put our bed of spinach before we put the fish on there. So that's moving back to my frying pan. I'm going to add some garlic to it. And then I'm going to start adding my spinach. Soon as I just want to get a little bit of color on it. Smells great with the garlic in there. And I'm just tossing it a little bit. I don't want to get it too dark. So I'm just tossing it a little bit. If it doesn't cook fully, it's fine. It's going to cook in its own heat. And I add some lemon juice to it. And I like it to get this beautiful bright green. That's when I take it out, because I know it's going to cook, continue to cook. Like these pieces that are near the heat, they're already cooked and wilted. I'm going to put it in a bowl. It's going to retain the heat, and it will be perfect by the time I plate it. Trying to get much of the garlic out too, because I don't want it to burn. If you don't like spinach, you could probably use anything else. You could use kale and whatnot. You'd have to cook it a little longer. You can also use asparagus. It's a great thing. You can make a bunch of asparagus and put the fish on top of the bed of asparagus. If you want to add more protein to this, you can always add beans in this mixture also. Add spinach and beans and then place the fish on top of it. If you want some color in it, take some grated carrots, perhaps. And the grated carrots will give you some color. I would cook them a little bit, maybe parboil them before I put them in. Adding a little bit more lemon juice in here. The pieces that are wilting, I'm taking them out already. The nice thing about spinach is that even if it's not fully cooked, it's still edible and tasty and doesn't affect your digestive tract like some of the other more cruciferous vegetables or greens that have more fiber in them. I'm going to throw a little bit of wine in here too. What the heck? Now this would be, I also had some nutmeg, and I'm going to put a little bit of nutmeg in here and a little bit in what I'm cooking. You could put salt, pepper in it if you desire. I'm going to let whoever is eating this dish, putting it all back in here, just give it a nice toss so that it's all together. Okay, so this looks pretty good to me. Turn my stove off. Let's put this on my platter. So I've got a beautiful bed of greens here. Look at that. That's a feast right there. And I'm going to take out our lemon fish, which is nice and bubbly and smells delicious. Got that there. We've got that. Now we'll pour the sauce over it. And the final little bit that we're going to do there is add some parsley. But here's sauce on top of it. Let me get the parsley. Now, sometimes what I've also might do with the garlic and the spinach is take lemon zest and cook that in. It just gives it a little bit more of a lemon flavor. Not necessary, but it also looks pretty when you have bits of yellow. Just giving this a rough chop. We've got some flat leaf parsley. You can use the curly parsley as well. Either one would work. Just gives it a nice fresh flavor. Okay, so.
Laura says her mouth is watering.
Well, mine is too.
Smells great.
So here you have peche al limone. So that's one. Let's check out our cod. See how that's doing. Clean this surface up a little bit here. And in advance, my thanks to George, who helps with the cleanup afterwards.
And the eating.
And the eating, yes. So let's check our cod. You see how economical in terms of time this is. So you've got to, oh, the other nice thing with this dish, sometimes I'll make some pasta. Serve a little bit of pasta on the side, no sauce. You just use the sauce from the fish, and it's absolutely delicious. So here is our cod with potatoes, Valencian cod and potatoes. It looks awesome. I got some nice browning by putting it in the oven. It was in a convection oven at 400 degrees. And what I'm going to do is spoon some sauce over the top of it. The cod is very fragile. But the saffron has given the sauce and the potatoes a nice yellow color. And this is ready to eat as well. Oh, man.
Ah, smells great.
Yep, the smells, the aroma is extraordinary with both of these dishes. You got the garlic and the lemon and the wine, and you've got the saffron and tomato here. All right, so while we have those two, we're going to move those to the side and very quickly make our salad. That was hot.
Ah.
Push this off to the side. Okay, so quick salad. What do? I got some broccoli here. It could be raw, or I prefer parboiled, which is what we did. So I parboiled this earlier. My preference would be red onion, but we had white onion, so some white onion in here. I don't know if those were sweet white onions.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, so if you're going to use white onions, use sweet ones. The red onions are good because they have a little bit of a tang. I'm going to do something different. I sliced up some delicious grapes, red seedless grapes. So now I'm going to get a little bit of cider vinegar. Any type of vinegar is good. And some mayonnaise. Oh, just some, I don't know. A little bit of salt, definitely want that. And like I said, I'm a fan of nutmeg. I think nutmeg goes great with most green vegetables. I'm gonna add just a tad. And then I'm gonna take some mayonnaise. You can use light, you can use vegan mayonnaise, you can use Miracle Whip, anything that you like. And since this is the last dish that I'm making, I'm gonna go old school and just use my hands and blend this together. And there you have a delicious.
Ooh, right. We have something else to add.
What is that?
The nut.
Oh, yes, I forgot. There is something else to add. Let me take one hand off. Nuts. I toasted some walnuts. And I did this in a saute pan. I didn't add any oil or anything. I just turned the heat on and watched it. I see a few pieces here are burnt, but it's okay.
Yep.
And that's going to give it some added crunch. Cashews are really good with this. If you like some heat, you can add a little bit of sriracha sauce to this. And there you have a delicious broccoli salad. If you don't have fresh grapes, you can use apples, diced apples. You can use raisins or any other dried fruit, just to have a little party in your mouth between the savory and the sweet. And that, ladies, and if there's a gent, is today's cooking lesson. We've done peche al limona. We've done Valencian cod. We've done a quick broccoli salad. And look how beautiful our glazed tarts have come out.
Beautiful.
There we go.
Just magnificent.
And we made these 4 dishes in an hour and 20 minutes. So
Yes.
add a little bit more for prepping. You can do this at home easily any night of the week.
We have some questions for you, Lenny.
As many as you want.
Okay. From Renee Green to everyone, do you put lemon juice on the apples after you cut them? And that was, yes, you can. Although
I did, Renee, because just because they were standing, because I pressed. If I was doing it right away, there's no need to it. It could add a little bit of tartness to the tart, which is good, but not necessary.
okay. Karen Backelman said, nice to see everyone. Just wanted to support the River Garden Auxiliary. Those of you who know me know that I do minimum cooking. So that was good that she was participating with us. There was a question about the beans. And again, those were the cannellini beans.
Yeah.
Although, Lenny, can you substitute other beans if you wish?
You can.
Okay.
I just happen to like the cannellini beans because they're somewhat buttery.
Okay. All right. Another question was, do you have to use a bay leaf?
No.
Naomi said she doesn't like it. Would it spoil the taste?
No.
Okay. Linda Weinstein said, thanks for a great presentation to everyone. It looked wonderful. Lana from Civitan says, does he use a mandolin slicer for the apples, potatoes, onions, and peppers?
You can, but it would be another thing to clean, so I did not. Many uses plate.
Yes.
And here, ladies, is our apple rose.
Beautiful, Lenny. Just beautiful. Beautiful. And we also said we like catfish, that would be good here too.
I've never cooked catfish, so I don't know.
Okay. And the paper that lined the pans we talked about was that parchment paper. And if you don't eat carbs, what can you use instead of the potatoes?
Maybe a turnip.
I was thinking
Parsnips.
turnip or
Parsnips would add some
parsnips,
sweetness to it,
right?
but any other elite vegetable, maybe cauliflower.
Maybe nice neutral taste.
Maybe cauliflower would be good. They eat a lot of potatoes in Spain, so this is this dish is from where it comes from Spain. But yeah, I would probably try turnips, or don't use the potatoes. Just use the aromatics, and if you want, then you can make some brown rice or some quinoa and serve this stew over that. The potatoes are just the base, like you said, starch for this dish. So you could just cook the fish without the starch and serve it over any grain, farro or quinoa, as I said, brown rice, wild rice, any of those.
Okay. And Mimi wrote that broccoli might work for some,
Good.
for some. And George got a thank you. Thank you for being a picture inner. He does. He's a great cleaner. Maureen said, I'm hungry. It's beautiful. Sandy Rosenfeld said, this was great. Thanks to all. And Maureen said, outstanding, Lenny.
Thank you.
Laura said, can't wait to cook that dish. And Silk said, looks delicious, Lenny. Thanks for a great presentation. And thank you to me, Ellen, as well. I do not have a pizza cutter, but that would have been good to have. My next kitchen purchase. The question was for the nuts used. Can you use pecans?
You can
You
use
can use
anything you want.
anything,
You
right?
can use anything you want.
Okay. From Maddie, she said, love the salad too. They all look delicious. From Kim, who is one of our members' daughters, far away, I think California, she says she always uses pecans and it makes her think of home.
There you
So
go.
there you go. And thanks, Lenny. This was so fun. From Lana, great job. From Lynn Reed, wonderful. Thank you. And from Linda Weinstein and Jax, thanks for a great presentation. Look forward to cooking tonight and making the apple rose. And from Mimi, and from me too. Lenny, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Just looking at this tart, the big tart that I made, I cut it into little triangle pieces. So you can do anything you want. I could have cut it into squares like the other one, but it was just as easy to do it this way. Makes it look a little prettier.
Beautiful, beautiful. On behalf of the River Garden Auxiliary and Uptown Civitan, once again, we want to give a heartfelt thank you to Lenny for taking time. You may or may not realize Lenny was over here the night before, last night, doing some prep work, came early, and he gives unselfishly of his time. We really love you, Lenny, and your recipes are outstanding. Thank you. Just a quick reminder that the next Cooking with Lenny session will be a month from now on Wednesday, March 17th at 11 o'clock. We will post what our menu will be and all of the recipe ingredients in the next couple weeks. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay safe. Keep practicing your COVID safe practices. Get vaccinated so that we can all get back to normal. And then we can invite people to our home for wonderful cooked dishes. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today. Sweat it.
Uh-huh.